They said the lighthouse had been dark for decades, but last night, its light returned, and so did something else. The wind howled over the jagged cliffs as Thomas approached the abandoned lighthouse. Salt spray stung his eyes and filled his nostrils with a bitter tang. The sky was a bruised shade of purple, dark clouds crawling like restless shadows. Every step on the rocky path made the ground shift under his weight, threatening to betray him. The lighthouse loomed ahead, its paint peeling and rust gnawing at its metal frame. A single window glimmered with a faint reflection, as if the building was watching him back. Thomas gripped the old lantern in his hand, feeling its weight anchor him against the chill wind. Each gust seemed to whisper secrets he was not meant to hear. The door creaked when he pushed it open, protesting years of neglect. Inside, the air was thick with damp and decay, smelling of old wood and something more sour, more alive. His footsteps echoed on the spiral stairs, each one a hollow drumbeat in the silence. Shadows clung to the corners, stretching unnaturally as the lantern swayed in his grip. Halfway up, he noticed scratches along the walls, shallow but deliberate, like claws marking a warning. A sudden chill ran down his spine, and he felt a presence behind him, though no one was there. He swallowed hard, forcing his mind to stay rational, but every instinct screamed to turn back. The lighthouse seemed to breathe with him, its timbers creaking like a living thing. At the top, the lantern light fell upon a desk, covered in dust and strange symbols. A journal lay open, pages yellowed and brittle. The words inside spoke of voices in the fog, of lights guiding ships to disaster instead of safety. Thomas shivered, realizing the lighthouse had never been a beacon, it had been a trap. A sudden flash of lightning revealed a figure behind the glass, staring at him. Its face was pale, almost translucent, with hollow eyes that reflected his own fear. The wind screamed louder, rattling the windows as if the building itself was enraged by his discovery. Thomas stepped back, heart hammering, and the floor beneath him groaned under an invisible weight. He reached the lantern forward, its light trembling across the room. The figure did not move, but the air thickened, pressing against his lungs, choking him slowly. A low whisper circled around his ears, incomprehensible yet filled with menace. The walls of the lighthouse seemed to shift, narrowing, closing in as though the building had a mind of its own. Thomas wanted to scream, but no sound escaped. Every instinct urged him to flee, yet his feet felt rooted to the splintered floorboards. The lantern flickered violently, casting dancing shadows that were not his own. Then he noticed the reflection in the glass was not his own, it was someone else, someone long dead. The eyes in the glass were hollow, empty yet piercing, drilling into his soul with a patience that felt eternal. Thomas staggered back, lantern shaking, casting the figure's distorted reflection across the walls. A cold draft swept through the room, carrying a faint whisper of sorrow and rage. It smelled of salt, decay, and something he could not name, something old and malignant. The figure began to move, not walking, but gliding across the floor with an unnatural stillness. Its gaze remained locked on him, unwavering, silent, heavy with accusation. Thomas's heart raced, each beat thudded in his ears, louder than the roaring wind outside. He felt the floor tremble beneath him, though the lighthouse itself remained still, as if the movement came from some unseen force. A sudden banging erupted from below, like heavy chains dragged across stone. The spiral stairs rattled in response, sending loose splinters raining down around him. Thomas's skin crawled. The sound was not random, it was deliberate, rhythmic, purposeful. He wanted to move, to descend and escape, yet every instinct seemed paralyzed by fear. He bent closer to the journal, searching for answers, for anything that could explain the horror before him. The symbols had changed, twisted into forms that made his stomach churn. The words on the pages shifted as he read, like they were alive, reshaping themselves to whisper warnings he could barely comprehend. One line burned itself into his mind: the light guides not the living, but the lost. The lantern flickered violently again, plunging him into darkness for a heartbeat, then illuminating the room with an eerie glow. The figure had moved closer, its feet not touching the floor, floating just above it. Its mouth opened slowly, revealing a black void, and the whisper became audible. It said his name, Thomas, in a voice that sounded like a chorus of the damned. He stumbled backward, tripping over the edge of the railing. The lantern slipped from his hand, crashing to the floor, scattering light and shadow in chaotic patterns. The figure reached toward him, impossibly fast, its fingers elongated, stretching as if reality itself bent to its will. Thomas's scream was swallowed by the wind, leaving only the echo of the lighthouse's timbers groaning in response. The walls began to pulse, as though the lighthouse had a heartbeat. A pressure built in the room, pressing down, tightening around his chest, stealing his breath. Thomas backed into the corner, hands clutching his chest, eyes darting for anything to hold onto. The journal lifted from the desk, pages turning violently, scattering letters into the air. Then the figure spoke again, this time in tones that felt like a knife across his mind. It whispered secrets of the lighthouse, of sailors lured to death, of souls trapped in glass and timber. The walls themselves seemed to murmur, the whispers forming sentences, accusing, warning, threatening. Thomas realized with horror that the lighthouse was alive, feeding, and he was now a part of its design. A cold hand gripped his shoulder, though no one was behind him. He spun around, but the room remained empty, yet the presence was undeniable, suffocating. The lantern's light flickered once more, revealing dozens of faint silhouettes pressed against the walls. They were eyes, pale and unblinking, staring out from the wooden plaster, locked onto him, judging him. The figure's form began to stretch and warp, growing taller, taller than the lighthouse itself. Its head brushed the ceiling, and the shadows it cast consumed the corners of the room, swallowing the lantern's light. A low moan reverberated through the glass, a sound of despair and fury entwined, vibrating in Thomas's bones. He fell to his knees, trembling, unable to move, trapped in a gaze that was both nowhere and everywhere. Outside, the storm intensified, lightning cracking the sky in jagged, blinding lines. Rain hammered the windows, yet the inside remained unnaturally dry, untouched by the storm, isolated in its own nightmare. The journal's pages floated around him, circling like tiny leaves caught in a tornado. They whispered names of the lost, of those who had been claimed by the lighthouse over centuries. Thomas realized the truth with a cold, numbing clarity. The lighthouse never shone to guide ships, it shone to call the living to witness the dead. It was a sentinel, a trap, a prison for the curious, the brave, the foolish. And now, it had called him. The figure lunged, impossibly fast, and Thomas felt the air itself tear around him. The room twisted, walls bending, floors tilting, as if reality had been rewritten by the presence in the glass. His ears rang with the cries of the trapped, the whispers of the condemned, a symphony of endless torment. Thomas's vision blurred, the lantern fell to the floor, extinguished by a force that seemed to suck the light from the world itself. Then silence. Absolute, terrifying silence. The wind ceased, the storm paused, and the lighthouse stood still, waiting. Thomas opened his eyes and realized he could not move. His body felt heavy, immovable, as though the building itself had claimed him. The figure no longer hovered, yet its presence remained, coiled around him like a living shadow. The journal lay open at his feet, the final line written in fresh ink, "The light keeps those who come too close." He screamed, but no sound escaped. The lighthouse watched. The wind waited, and Thomas understood that he was no longer a visitor. He was part of the secret. The first light of dawn crept over the sea, turning the waves to molten silver. The storm had passed, leaving behind only silence and the faint echo of the wind. From the cliffs, the lighthouse stood tall once more, calm and still, its glass reflecting the soft glow of morning. Fishermen from the nearby village noticed the light burning again after so many years of darkness. They spoke in hushed tones, wondering who had repaired it, who had dared to enter that cursed tower. No one had seen Thomas return. His boat still rested on the shore, half buried in sand, as if waiting for someone who would never come back. Inside the lighthouse, everything was unchanged. The lantern stood upright, flickering faintly though no oil remained. The journal lay closed upon the desk, its pages unstirred by any wind. And beneath a thin layer of dust, a single new line had been written in steady hand. The keeper watches. The sea remembers. Outside, a fog began to rise, thick and unbroken, swallowing the cliffs in white silence. Within it, faint footsteps echoed, slow and deliberate, circling the tower's base. Sometimes, when the waves crash hard against the rocks at night, the villagers say they can hear a man calling out from within the fog. His voice carries on the wind, pleading, warning, forever repeating a single name. The lighthouse continues to shine, its beam sweeping across the endless sea. To sailors lost in the storm, it appears as a promise of safety. But those who have lived long enough on that coast know better. They know the light is not salvation. It is remembrance, and it always calls for another soul to keep its secret.